Welcome to part 1 of Getting to Know Your Disadvantaged Students. In this section, we're going to talk about why it's important to know more about your disadvantaged learners, why we need to share that information widely across our schools, and some top tips on how to share it within your setting.
Hi and welcome to this session, which is about learning everything we can about a student. And we're going to have a conversation and give you some ideas and thinking about why this is really important, particularly when we're thinking about our most disadvantaged children in school.
And that's a really good question to start with, isn't it? Why is it particularly important for our disadvantaged learners? We want to know as much as we can about all of the pupils in front of us. But why is it particularly important for the disadvantaged learners? I know both of you have got some ideas on this, but I'll just share mine very quickly. And it's because the more we know about the children in front of us, the more we adapt our teaching, even subconsciously, in order to meet their needs more effectively. That's my very simple viewpoint on it.
I think I'd say for the disadvantaged children in particular, it's important because it's such an easy way to show we care. And to show we're actually genuinely interested to hear about the other things they do and maybe share some of the things we do with them as well.
And it's about knowing the children for their strengths and their interests, isn't it? But I agree completely with what you said, Louise. And one of the things I've put down really is about that all children need to know that we care about them. We know that, but that is particularly true from those children who come from a low social economic status, who have all these other issues going on. Shall we start by thinking about some of the questions we've talked about already about, well, do we already know things about students and how can we tap into that knowledge that already exists? One of the things I thought about with that is that we need to remember that the majority of children that come through the gates in the morning are already known to us because in every single school, they've been there for years. And there'll only ever be one cohort that comes through and the odd child here and there that is new to the school. So therefore, we've got to recognise the wealth of knowledge and understanding that should already exist within school from previous teachers, people who previously worked with children, and that they can share that information. We can harness that and share it so that it can be used effectively.
And in terms of the most effective ways of doing that, we have to recognise, obviously, that if we just rely on informal methods within the staff room of passing on information about pupils, it's going to be very piecemeal and bitty. And when the teachers who then inherit those children aren't going to have enough information, there has to be a systematic way of sharing the information about those disadvantaged learners, which is going to be effective in generating that advantage that we want for those children.
There's a lot of evidence from our visits to schools that there's at least one person in the school who knows an awful lot about those most disadvantaged learners, but it isn't always spread out where it needs to be. So one example that I've seen that's been highly effective in a primary school is they've created a display in the staff room, recognising all GDPR regulations, obviously, but they allow information to be put next to the disadvantaged children's pictures on the wall that are then reflecting all the extras you find out about them. So it doesn't say anything about how they did in the latest maths test, but it says, did you know that they've recently joined the karate club? It's front and centre for everybody to look at, which I think is a great example. I'm sure you've both got others.
I've certainly seen it done rather than putting it on a display publicly in a staff room, but done electronically, spreadsheets or some kind of source of information that's stored centrally. One of the issues with doing it that way is ensuring that everybody just look at it and they find out the information from that. Whereas if it isn't on display somewhere, obviously that's easier for people to access and get involved with. But I want to echo your point, Louise, really, which is about attainment data is one thing, and we need to break that down and we do need to pass that on, but it's not about attainment. It's about getting to know the children in the widest possible sense.
Yeah, and a combination of those two is used in a number of the schools that I work with. So that they use the read and destroy method, so that two pupils who are disadvantaged are highlighted in an email which goes out to everybody. The expectation is that every member of staff, not just teachers, but every member of staff reads that email and then deletes it. Or they can read it, add something and send it back if they've got new information about that child, and that's updated for everybody to read. And on a weekly basis, those that are highlighted during that week go up on the staff room wall for people to annotate those sheets as well. It's a way of making sure that staff share not just the attainment data, as Trevor was saying, but that soft intelligence that we have about the children, which is going to make a difference to the way we actually have a relationship with them.
And in the very, very best examples, lunchtime teams are involved in it. The catering staff know about it. Everybody who is going to be having a really important interaction with a disadvantaged child has the opportunity to engage in that level of information, which I think is absolutely fantastic. And I mention catering in particular because of the experience, particularly at secondary school, that some of our most vulnerable, most poverty-stricken children can have. And if your catering staff are aware of who they are and what they're dealing with, then that can make things an awful lot smoother for a young person who's already feeling a little bit upset or finding things difficult.
One of the other things I was reflecting on when we looked at these questions prior to coming on was about, we talk all the time about creating an equitable environment. And back to the reason of why do we need to know this information? Well, if we know this information, we can make the environment more equitable for our most disadvantaged children, and we can put the things in place to support them. The other thing I just wanted to bring up really is this could be very different in a primary setting to a secondary setting in terms of getting to know a child, because we know in a primary, generally the children stay in one class, they stay with the same teacher, and that teacher does get to know the children really well, and hopefully that can continue to be harnessed but still shared, as you've already explained through that example you used, Louise. But in a secondary school that can sometimes be a little bit hard. It might sit with a form tutor as opposed to a class teacher, and that sharing of information becomes absolutely critical, because we need to make people aware of the difficulties that some of our most disadvantaged children have. And again, this idea of educating the staff can be really difficult, because some of the things that you find out about children actually can be quite upsetting in a sense, and heartbreaking, that you never quite realize that that's what life was like for that child when they leave school at the end of the day. But unless we know, we can't adapt our practice to make that environment as equitable as we want to.
And just to say as well that when we hear about the positives, that young person that's just qualified for a county level event of some description, that sharing that in the staff room, I've had members of staff say to me, oh, but they'll get sick of hearing it, if we all go on about it to them. And just to say, no, they don't. Obviously, you need to find the way of mentioning it that they're comfortable with, and it might not be bringing them out in front of an assembly of 200 children, but if every time somebody passes them in the corridor, they say, oh, well done for that selection, you can almost see the young people getting more confident, building their self-esteem. So don't be afraid of overusing a particular positive that you find out about a young person.
It's really important that building confidence in one particular area has a rub-on effect into every other area of a child's life, and their engagement with school and their engagement with their learning. If they feel they can do something and somebody's acknowledging that has a big impact, and we mustn't ever forget that.
Thanks very much for watching part 1 of Getting to Know Your Most Disadvantaged Learners. We look forward to seeing you in part 2, where we'll be talking about sharing knowledge at formal transition points.